and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaylin. I am a second-year PhD student in History and African American Studies at Yale, and I am also the founder of Accepted Consulting, an academic consulting firm focused on providing resources for students from community college through to postgraduate study. We offer one-on-one consultation services, master classes, free office hours, and various other resources for our clients to help you access higher education. In today's video, we are going to be talking all about the statement of purpose. The statement of purpose is one of the most important elements of your graduate school application. So we're going to be talking all about the various steps, the things that you need to include, the things to avoid, and how it is that you can come across as the best possible candidate for that program. As an academic admissions consultant, I have read hundreds of statements of purpose over the last 2 years since starting my business, and I've learned a couple things along the way in order to help you develop your statements so that way you come across as the best candidate possible, but also so that way you can clearly define your goals as a graduate student and see whether graduate school is right for you. In addition to the video, I'm also going to be including the graduate admissions essay guide, which is going to be linked in the description down below. This is going to include some examples as well as my in-depth tips and tricks for writing your statements of purpose, your personal statements, as well as your diversity statement. I will also have videos corresponding with the essay guide, which means that I will have a video coming up on personal statements and diversity statements. So if you have any questions about any component of the graduate admissions application, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, like this video so that way I know that you guys are watching, and let's go ahead and get into how to write a statement of purpose. So first off, we're going to talk a little bit about the purpose behind the statement of purpose or the statement of intent. Some schools call it something different, and one thing to keep in mind is that if you are applying to a school like Oxford or Cambridge, which says to write a statement of purpose / personal statement, what they mean is that they want a statement of purpose. The reason being that a statement of purpose demonstrates who you are as a candidate and as a researcher, whereas a personal statement gets a little bit more into depth about who you are as an individual, why it is that you're developing research in this area, why you care so much about this research, etc. In the statement of purpose, however, you are trying to demonstrate your skills, your abilities, the methods that you've used in your research, and what type of scholar you will become. Within this, you need to be able to state what type of research you are looking to develop, which brings us into the sections of the statement of purpose. The sections of the statement of purpose are as follows. First section is the research proposal. Second section is your background, and the third section is your conclusion. The first section should take up about 25% of your statement, the background should take up about 50%, and then the why statement should take up about 25% of the remaining word count. Most statements of purpose range between 750 words to 1,500 words, though the most common statement of purpose is around 1,000. If it is not stated on the university's website, my recommendation is to stick within about 1,000 words for your statement of purpose, as that is standard. Furthermore, let's talk a little bit about the formatting of your statement of purpose. My recommendation is at the top left corner, you place statement of purpose -- name of the university, and in the top right corner, you place your last name. You don't have to do this, you can use a different format if you choose, but this is one of the most common formats that I've seen across universities. You can use other forms, there's not a specific format that you have to use, but I'm saying this that way you have a reference to go off of. Secondly, you're gonna write statement of purpose in the dead center of the page, so that way they know which document they're looking at, and then you're gonna go ahead and get into the word count. Oftentimes you're gonna wanna stick to the 12-point font, double spacing, in order to write the statement of purpose. You want your sections to be very clear because visually the committee is looking for the flow of your statement, and if you write really short, choppy paragraphs, or if the words are too close together, this format can get lost. All right, so now that we've gone over the logistics, we're gonna go ahead and get straight into the actual structure and the format and things that you need to include in your statement. So section 1 is the research proposal. In this research proposal, you need to be rather narrow. I get questions all the time about how narrow your research needs to be, and there is an example or an analogy that I actually picked up from Tom Mulaney, who is a professor at Stanford. He also makes TikTok content. If you're looking for graduate school admissions content or you're looking for other resources, he is an excellent resource. He's on YouTube, he's also on TikTok, so go ahead and check him out. So the example that he uses is, say you are applying for an architecture job. It's a corporate architecture firm, and you're going in, you're showing your portfolio, resume, cover letter, all those things, and they ask for you in the second round of interviews to provide a blueprint based on the dimensions or based on the criteria being requested by a client. So you go, you write up your model, you make sure that all the measurements are correct, etc. You go to them and you show them the blueprint. That building may never actually come to fruition. It may be hypothetical, the client may leave, they may be just using this as an exercise, but what they're trying to do is see how is it that you can technically develop a project. And that is pretty much the exact same thing for when you're applying for a PhD. If you're applying for a master's, however, the requirements for having this research proposal fleshed out is less severe. However, you can make yourself stand apart by having your research proposal very well fleshed out. So how is it that you go from a broad project down to one that you can actually write into your statement of purpose? So let's say I meet with a client and they tell me I'm interested in 19th century history. I say, okay, what about the 19th century that most interests you? And then they say gender relations. I'm really interested in studying women in the 19th century. I say, okay, so what is it about women? What class, gender, religious affiliation, other types of organizations that they may be affiliated with, what type of community are you looking at among women? And then they tell me that they want to look at a specific area in London and the impact on Black women who had escaped slavery. There you go. That's more of a project. So what is it about those women that perhaps escaped slavery from the Caribbean and are now in England? Are we looking at their legal status? Are we looking at their social relations? Are we looking at political organizations that made it possible for them in order to get into Britain? Are we looking at the early 19th century, in which case slavery is more prominent? Are we looking at someone who escaped slavery as a child and is now into their adult years and it's the late 19th century? Are we doing a post-colonial study of their identity and space? Those are the questions I want you to start asking yourself. So as you have this wider project, you need to have someone that will push you to start thinking about all of these various elements that you really want to dig into. And oftentimes when I work with clients, I help them develop that project, even if they've come to me having zero clue exactly what it is that they want to do. You want to make sure that that project is well fleshed out when you go in to write the proposal, so that way you can provide examples, you can think about your methods, your sources, etc. The primary difference, however, in the proposal in the humanities or in the social sciences, where you have a lot more control over your project, is if you are in STEM. So I'm going to leave a little addendum here, which is to say that in STEM fields, so for example, I have clients that are going into astrophysics, or I have other clients that are going into clinical psychology. Those programs are so dependent on your PI. So instead of going in with the well-fleshed research proposal on your own, I want you to cater your project or the idea of the development of your project around what is being done by that PI and that lab. Because oftentimes you're gonna try a couple different labs and then you're gonna end up figuring out which PI you wanna work with. So think about the structure of the program and how is it that you can demonstrate that your research will build off of the types of experience that you will gain in coursework or that you will gain in the research phase under a PI. This is going to vary obviously between fields, but this is something to consider when you're going into the fields that are a little bit more lab focused or are focused on someone else's study. How is it that you're going to build off of that? What types of skills are you looking to gain? And where do you think that you might be heading? Whereas in the humanities or the social sciences, where you have a lot more control over your project, I want you to think about indicators. I want you to think about evidence. In this, I ask my clients, what are your sources? What types of quantitative data are you looking at? What populations are you looking at? Do you need to go do ethnographic work? Do you need to go collect oral histories? How is it that you're applying a particular theory to how it is you're asking the questions when you're collecting your oral histories? Those types of things have to be taken into consideration, and you don't have to have it perfectly fleshed out, but I want you to start thinking about your indicators and your evidence, because then you can begin to hypothesize about how that project will develop. So now that you have a general idea of the project, let's talk about the structure of the actual statement. To begin, you're going to start with a sentence or two that is going to very broadly discuss what your project is. If you want examples of this, I actually have a video on my YouTube channel called How I Got Into Yale and also How I Got Into Oxford, both of which I read the statement of purpose that got me into these schools. There are definitely things that I would change about it now that I have been an admissions consultant for 2 years, but those are good examples of the way to structure the first couple sentences. So for example, in my master's, aim to develop research that does this, and talk about the kind of broad connections of your research and what it is that you're looking to do. Then in the second part of that, I want you to dive a little bit more specifically into the types of questions or the problem that you're looking to eradicate or that you're looking to intervene in. From there, you're going to want to make a statement about what sources you're using, your evidence, how it is that you're actually going to go into this data collection, how is it that you're going to develop this study, is it a comparative study? Think about what your evidence is. So for example, are we looking at one geographic region? Are we looking at a town? Are we looking at a village? Are we looking at two different places and doing a comparative study? Are we doing a comparative study between two different types of data? The possibilities are truly endless. So start thinking about what it is that you're using as your indicators, because that's going to want to play into the research proposal of your statement of purpose. Next, you want to talk a little bit about the literature. So instead of doing a full literature review, I want you to just dig into what are the main arguments and what is your intervention. So for example, in the statement of purpose that I submitted for Yale, I talked a little bit about how previous scholarship on the history of slave law had focused on the development of slavery and the codes that defined slavery in positive law, but that there hadn't been a gendered dynamic influencing those studies. So there wasn't a look at matrilineal descent as one of the main indicators and one of the main slave laws that was initiated or enacted in the British American colonies. And same thing for the Spanish American colonies. So that was essentially my intervention. I talked about the historians up until this point have really looked at this and made this particular intervention. This is where I tend to diverge, or this is where I want to make a contribution. I want you to be direct about what it is you're arguing or what you hypothesize or what type of work you're seeking to develop, because when you are entering into a PhD program in particular, you are looking to make a strong scholarly contribution that is novel. So you need to be able to demonstrate why it is that your work matters. All right, let's go into section number 2, which is the background. So as I said before, this should take up about 50% of your overall statement. So if you're running at about 1,000 words, it's going to be about 500 words. In here, I want you to indicate 2 or 3 background pieces that you think are important to your overall scholarship, your training, and your future development. So this will include things like research positions that you've held, an undergraduate honors thesis that you wrote, classes that you took, work experience that you have where you developed actual skill sets that you think are applicable. The first paragraph should hopefully be something that is actually written. The reason being that this will likely be your written sample. The committee's attention will be on the beginning end of your statement. So you want to make sure that the pieces of information that make the strongest argument for your abilities are at the forefront. There is a strategy to the structure of a statement of purpose, and I'm giving you guys all of my best tips. So take it, try to see what you can do with it. And in this section, I want you to talk about the written work that will become the written sample. For me, this was my undergraduate honors thesis. I used it as my written sample for Oxford. I also used it as my written sample for Yale. So in here, I talked a little bit about the overall scope of the project, talked about the sources and how I developed the study, and also how I pivoted the study. Initially, I was looking at farm records from various plantations in Virginia, but I eventually moved to this evacuation record and developed a quantitative study. That's what I talked about in the statement of purpose. Tell me how your thought process, your methods, and your project evolved along the way. What snags did you come across? Was there a lack of sources? Was there a source that was more appealing? All of those things need to play into your overall narrative, because what you're seeking to demonstrate to the committee is not only am I a one-trick pony that knows how to do one particular project, but I know how to evolve with my research, and I know that research changes over time. Often candidates will say that they're worried that if their proposal is too narrow, it will demonstrate that they have an inability to change, that they're not teachable. And the background section is where you demonstrate that. You show your evolution as a scholar, which is why in undergrad, you are developing these projects, and in graduate school, you should be going in a slightly different direction. Don't just continue your undergraduate work. Tell me how it's going to change, how it's going to evolve. What types of things did you learn in your undergraduate studies or your master's studies, or even your professional experience that you think are applicable? In the second paragraph, again, you're going to be talking a little bit about some other experiences that you've had. I talked specifically about a course that I took at UCLA, which led to the research project I was proposing. So however it is that you can make a connection between your past work and your future work, go ahead and go with that. And then right before you're about to go into the final section, I want you to make a statement about your skills. I want you to be very explicit about the things that you have learned and what it is you hope to develop. Where do you think that you need further research? Where do you think you need further skills, training, classes, etc.? This is again where you demonstrate that you are teachable and that you are looking to learn and develop as a scholar. You are not a complete scholar yet, and that you have so much more to learn. I have developed research in these ways, developed these skills, but I am looking to develop research in this way because I think it's important in XYZ way for my dissertation or for my overall development as a scholar, however it is that you want to state it. But again, you want to show that evolution. All right, so now let's go on to section number 3, which is the why. So the why section is where you demonstrate why you want to go to this program specifically. The why section is also one of the most important sections on your statement of purpose, because this is where you make an argument for why it is that you need to be at this particular institution. One thing that I see done very poorly is the why section. This is the place where you can either make or break your statement. Not because it shows how much of a scholar you are, but because it shows to that committee whether you are committed to that program, whether you're really interested in them, and that they should be interested in you. In this section, I don't want you to make a vague statement about the diversity of the faculty or the prestige of the university or the access to resources. I want you to be specific. For example, talking about Yale and that I wanted to come here because of the Gilder Lehrman Center. The Gilder Lehrman Center was one of the most important resources for me as a community college student, and access to information about slavery and about African American history in a public forum was something that was really important to me as a developing scholar, and was something I really wanted to get involved in as a PhD student. That is one of the main arguments for why I wanted to come in and do the joint program, and I wanted to get involved in the Yale community. Find your why, find your reason for wanting to apply to that school. The next piece is that you want to talk about who you want to work with. You don't have to necessarily indicate a specific advisor at the master's level, but at the PhD level, you're going to want to indicate who it is you are interested in working with most. Indicate who you want to be your supervisor. That should be somebody that you've had a conversation with previously in an informational interview, and also indicate other faculty members both in that department and outside of the department that you want to work with. But don't just tell me that you want to work with that supervisor because their research in X, Y, and Z aligns with your research interests. Tell me what it is about their methods, about their sources, about the way they use evidence, the way they manage to crunch data. Tell me how it is that they are going to help you in your training and your development as a scholar. Don't just tell me about the classes. Don't just tell me the broad assessment of that their research is interesting to you. Tell me why it matters. And then the next piece, you're going to want to indicate things that are really specific to that program. This includes things like classes, working groups, research opportunities, travel grants, etc. Talk about the course structure, for example, like the ability to take 2 years of coursework versus just 1. Those things are going to be important to your development as a scholar, so these are things that you're going to want to develop in your why section or mention in your why section, because they are going to have an impact on your ability to develop as you're in the program. And then you're going to wrap up with a final statement, that should be a sentence or two, about how that program will help propel you into the career that you seek to pursue. This can be that you want to go on and pursue a PhD from a master's program, or that you want to become a professor, or that you want to go work out in industry. Tell me why it is that this program will help you get there. All right, we've now reached the end of the video. I've given you all of my secrets, tips, and tricks for how to write a statement of purpose. If you have any questions, please reach out to me by email. And if you would like to work with myself or with anybody on my team, please go ahead and check out acceptedconsulting.com. All of the links and everything that you should need will be down below, along with the essay guide. Thank you all so much for watching today. If you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up. Keep me posted if you apply to graduate school this year and whether or not you were accepted. I really love getting to hear from you all and see how your own academic journeys are progressing. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye everyone.